This idea of narrowcasting and the shift in kind of consumer behaviour, could you kind of talk a bit more about how trust impacts on that?
Well, it's a really complicated issue because obviously historically big broadcasters, businesses like, not even businesses, government-owned organisations like the BBC have reached millions of people, providing them with amazing entertainment, education, and really essentially traded on trust and the nation's belief in what they're doing. In a narrowcast world, then that whole basis starts to change. You've got new brands using different channels, trying to sell new entertainment concepts. So the whole idea of trust becomes completely warped in many ways. It needs to be redefined for that new world of being very focused narrowcast. And I think a really good illustration is when you enable people to create their own content or adapt their own content. That can clearly be abused, and members of a community can be exposed to content that they didn't envisage receiving, and therefore trust becomes massively undermined. And it's actually making sure that you've got the product safeguards and management, so that situation, if it does happen, is managed. But obviously, overall, that opportunity doesn't occur. And I think one of the complicated things about that is what is acceptable to one audience, something that might be quite edgy or vulgar, for instance, is perfectly acceptable amongst a community, obviously, sort of certain youth demographics. But actually, if it moves into another community area, children being the obvious one, but even mature adults and elderly, that what's appropriate for that niche audience becomes totally inappropriate for that community. So it's much more complex than in a broadcast model, and trust becomes more complicated in that way.
I think one of the really interesting things we touched on this morning as well was the relationship between technology and entertainment from a company point of view, and also product and marketing.
Yeah.
So just wondered if you could maybe explain that to us a bit.
So the product, and again, Club Home is a very good example of this. The product there is a product absolutely focused on the needs and wants of an 8-year-old, and everything about the product, you can see when an 8-year-old is playing on it, they're having a really deep and rich experience, and that product is carefully managed so that the advertising within is a subscription-based model, so advertising doesn't intrude upon it, and the kind of emotional situations they put an 8-year-old in, sometimes can push them in terms of new experiences, but it's not overly stressful for their maturity. I think the challenge then becomes, how do you market that product? Because clearly it requires a lot of discipline for a company to stay true to that 8-year-old view of the world. And from a marketing point of view, if you can see a bigger market segment or an ability to make more money from that 8-year-old segment in a way that means being more aggressive with the marketing, then many companies would have the temptation to do that. In this instance, Disney hasn't done that. They've stayed very true to that 8-year-old experience, being clear that it's a commercial operation, but kept the marketing within bounds that fits what parents want for their children within that community. So they've managed to align that, and it's that constant need to adjust the product to the way it's marketed, and the ambitions for the network, and the courage of a company, if they feel they're going too far or not living that values, to essentially say, well, we need to stop doing this because we can't make money out of doing it in this limited format. We don't try and extend it with marketing, we just stop doing it, and that's a crucial understanding, I think, to making products successful and not allowing marketing to undermine them.